I'm very pleased to announce that my book on the Gospel of John, The Eye of the Beholder, the Gospel of John as Historical Reportage, will be coming out on March 1st. So watch my author page for a link to that on Amazon when it's ready. Just keep your eyes peeled, because this is going to be a great opportunity for you to learn more about the Gospel of John. You can go right now to my website, lydiamcgrew.com. I will provide the link below, and you can see a PDF of the table of contents of that book. So that'll give you some idea of what's in it already. It's just, the chapters listed and their titles. When the book comes out and you get a hold of a copy, you'll see that also each chapter has a bullet-pointed summary at the end as well, which makes it very user-friendly and easy to see what's covered in specific passages and specific chapters. In this video, I want to focus on some of the great endorsements that I've received that I'm very excited about for The Eye of the Beholder. And here, I really need to thank my publisher, Nathan Ward, who has worked hard getting in touch with scholars and requesting their endorsements, people that I would not have ventured to approach myself, that he has approached and succeeded in asking them for their endorsements. Before I begin reading some of these blurbs, I want to emphasize that DeWart Publishing gave these endorsers ample time to read the book. And we made it quite clear that what we wanted were endorsements that were based upon a knowledge of what was in the book. We didn't want anything that was shallow, that was just based on a description or friendship or some other consideration, but rather that we wanted them to know what they were endorsing. That, of course, does not mean that everyone who endorsed the book agrees with every proposition in the book. That's going to vary from one person to another. But it does mean that these were endorsements that were given with ample opportunity to digest what was there. So without further ado, I'm going to start reading some excerpts from several of the endorsements with names, and there's just too many. I can't read them all. And then I'm going to list some additional names of endorsers. On my author page on Facebook, over the next few weeks, in the lead up to the release of The Eye of the Beholder, I'll be posting the context of these longer endorsements, longer versions of these, as well as probably some additional ones. So you'll be able to see more and see these quotations in context. I want to start with an endorsement from a scholar who is very highly regarded. He's a Johannine scholar, a Greek scholar. He's written too many books for me to even list. And this is Stanley Porter. Stanley Porter is a very, very well thought of Canadian Johannine New Testament scholar generally. And here's what he had to say. What happens when a major analytic philosopher subjects the arguments of New Testament scholarship on John's Gospel to critical scrutiny? This book. McGrew makes a strong case for what she calls historical reportage as a means of reading and understanding John's Gospel as a reliable and trustworthy account of the life, ministry, and teachings of Jesus. McGrew's opponents dare not dismiss this set of arguments. That's Stanley Porter. Next blurb I'm going to read, excerpt from a blurb, is by Paul Anderson. Paul Anderson also is a very well-regarded Johannine scholar. He was a founding member of the John, Jesus, and History section that's actually quite well known that's done at the Society of Biblical Literature conference. This is what he had to say. Among biblical scholars over the last century and a half, two dichotomies of David Strauss have been taken as givens. A theologically invested report cannot be objectively historical, and B, respectable Jesus research may only make use of the synoptics, but not the Gospel of John. In this philosophic critique of gospel ahistoricity, the author forces critical scholars to doubt their doubts, as well as default alternatives to traditional views, a worthy contribution to the field. That's Paul Anderson. This next scholar is an Australian Gospels scholar, author of books on Luke and on Acts. This is Alan Thompson. In The Eye of the Beholder, Lydia McGrew deals a fatal blow to the widespread claims that John rearranged or presented material with little regard for historical accuracy in order to serve merely theological or symbolic purposes. With numerous illustrations and concise bullet point chapter summaries, this rigorous research is accessible to specialists and non-specialists alike. All who are interested in John's Gospels, students, teachers, scholars, Bible readers, pastors, can and should take up and read this important work. Highly recommend it. So that's Alan Thompson. Then New Testament scholar Thomas Schreiner says, Lydia McGrew takes up the mantle of B.F. Westcott, Leon Morris, and D.A. Carson by arguing that John the Apostle was the author of the fourth Gospel and that the Gospel of John is historically reliable. The idea that the Gospel of John represents both profound theology and genuine history isn't fashionable today, but McGrew demonstrates with a battery of arguments and incisive reasoning that the entirety of the fourth Gospel is faithful to history. John, as an eyewitness, reports accurately what Jesus said and did. I am thankful for McGrew's book that challenges an accepted tenet in historical critical scholarship, showing us that there are solid reasons for affirming that the Gospel of John truly represents to us the historical Jesus. This next one is from William Weinrich. He is a Lutheran Johannine scholar and author of the Concordia Commentary. Thus far, he's come out with a commentary on the first six, and just beginning chapter 7 of the Gospel of John. So this is Weinrich. The traditional symbol of John's Gospel is the eagle. John lifts our minds and souls into the heights of spiritual truth. Since the 19th century, Johannine scholarship seems to have thought that the eagle only rarely touched ground. No one has approached the task of defending the historical truthfulness of John's Gospel with the vigor and clarity that Lydia McGrew does in this book. Her thesis is bold. John presents the story of Jesus such as it in reality was. This book deserves wide reading. There is no conservative naivete here, but solid thinking while engaging recent arguments which are less confident about the historical facticity of John. This next quotation is from Edward Klink. He's the author of the Zondervan Commentary on John. Quote, Johannine scholarship has often spoken of the fourth gospel as a problem and a question, driven by challenges or denials regarding its historicity and credibility. Writing to several kinds of readers, this helpful resource offers students of John not only a tour and triage through contemporary Johannine scholarship, but also training for reading God's Word in the modern scientific world. This next quotation is from Craig Blomberg. He needs no introduction to evangelicals in my audience. He is a highly regarded New Testament evangelical scholar and also author of a very important book on the historical reliability of John's Gospel. Blomberg, in his blurb, lists various movements in New Testament scholarship over the past decades in the direction of considering John more and more historical. And then carrying on from that, he says, now Lydia McGrew, largely independently of these developments, shows how strong a case can be mounted for the entire gospel as historical reportage, when one does not begin with certain commonly asserted but unproven and implausible scholarly hypotheses about John's composition. I am grateful that McGrew found as much of my work on the historical reliability of John as helpful as she did, and I am glad to see it pushed even further. And then I want to put a philosopher in here. Robert Larmer is a top-notch Canadian philosopher of religion, especially working in the philosophy of miracles. And here's what he had to say. He even mentions the mirror or the mask. Expanding on the superb work she did in The Mirror or the Mask, we again find meticulous consideration of the evidence combined with a clear-eyed appraisal of arguments she finds lacking in clarity and substance. Her sustained and massive case for taking the historicity of John's Gospel seriously deserves a wide readership. Now, I'm going to stop reading excerpts at this point because I want to keep this video short, but I'm going to list some more names. So here are some people who also blurbed The Mirror or the Mask, also endorsed The Mirror or the Mask. And when The Eye of the Beholder comes out, you'll be able to see their full endorsements, and I'll probably post them on my author page as well. John Warwick Montgomery, J.P. Moreland, British scholar Peter J. Williams, excellent British New Testament and Greek scholar, Old Testament scholar Jack Collins. And Collins, I also quote in The Eye of the Beholder on this claim that Jesus sometimes looks like Lady Wisdom and looks like an allegorical figure in John's Gospel, and Collins does not agree with that and has some communication there as an Old Testament scholar as well. Randy Lydia, who is the author of the Bible Works Greek New Testament diagrams, and was for many years a professor of Greek. Then Canadian New Testament scholar Tony Costa. Then American New Testament scholar Andrew Doss, a Lutheran New Testament scholar. Going back to Canada, Pierre Constant, New Testament and Greek professor and the chairman of New Testament in Toronto. Scott Manor, who is a patristics scholar and a scholar of early Christianity. Peter Simpson, who is a professor of classics and philosophy at the City University of New York. Andrew Bartlett, QC, is a British, he's a British jurist. He's a British judge, and also has done work concerning the New Testament, and even has an honors thesis out there on the accounts of the resurrection. And so these are just some, and there are even more endorsers of The Eye of the Beholder. As you can see, though, this list of endorsers includes Johannine scholars, New Testament scholars, Greek scholars, people with expertise squarely in the field. Certainly, I want you to get the book and read it and decide for yourself. I am not telling you, agree with my book, look at all these people who agree with me. I am not saying that. In fact, I'm always encouraging my readers to get hold of my work and even of the work of people with whom I'm disagreeing, and to compare and to decide for themselves and really dig in if you're interested in these issues. Here's something that this list of blurbers and the warmth of their endorsements really can accomplish, though, and a consideration of their qualifications. It can counter a mistaken view concerning what you might call the respectability in scholarly terms of my thesis that I'm arguing for. So my thesis, of course, as one of the blurbers said, is bold. It's that John never changed anything deliberately. He never was out there, changing a date or massaging the facts or embellishing Jesus' discourses to put theological things that, he thought were true to Jesus' message, but that the historical Jesus didn't really say, into Jesus' mouth and that kind of thing. And he never did that. And that, in fact, he was an eyewitness and he was highly reliable and accurate in what he recounted in just objective historical terms. And he's giving us reportage. That's a bold thesis. There's an idea that you will hear about that thesis, and it goes approximately like this. It's that there could be only two reasons why someone would argue for the thesis that I'm arguing for here in The Eye of the Beholder. One of them is that the person would say that someone who argued for that thesis must be ignorant. Okay, someone who would argue for that is just outside of New Testament scholarship, doesn't realize what the arguments are, doesn't really know all that evidence, and that's causing all of the real Johannine scholars and the real New Testament scholars to realize that this is just cannot be held. It's untenable. And perhaps that someone like me who argues for it, doesn't know what he doesn't know. So ignorance. Or theological presupposition. Well, someone might hold to that, but only because the person is just clinging to it, to some kind of theological presumption that it's got to be that way because the person can't handle any alternative view. And so the thesis that I'm presenting here gets dismissed. And if you picked up on that idea, you might think that my book is dismissible, that it doesn't have a place at the scholarly table, and that it must be a result of either my being ignorant or my being theologically pre-committed to it. And if I were just knowledgeable and followed the argument wherever it led, regardless of whether I liked it or not, I would have to be bound, if I were handling this that way, to come to the conclusion that at least sometimes John is altering history and massaging facts and so forth. And I think these blurbs really push back against that. Is my thesis unfashionable? Yes. Is it beyond the scholarly pale? Is it the result of ignorance that I hold it? No. Okay, so it is worthy of consideration. I'm giving a worthy contribution to the field, as these blurbers are saying. So if you're interested in John's historicity in arguments for it, in arguments against it, and what can be said in response to arguments against it, if you're interested in how historical it is it just somewhat historical? Is it a lot historical, but sometimes John changed things? This book is worth reading and giving real consideration, deep consideration, and I think that's what these blurbs can lead to, is your at least delving into that with that consideration. Now, if you're a layman, you may be saying, wow, that sounds heavy. But as Dr. Thompson, I believe it was, pointed out, this is actually accessible to the non-specialist as well. So this is for you. This is for pastors and readers of the Bible and laymen as well as scholars. I'm trying to cross over that audience. And you can delve into that. You can use the indices. You can use the chapter summaries and the table of contents. Read the portions that are most relevant to you, that you're most interested in. But of course, I'd love it if you read the whole thing. And when I release it, I will also be giving a little summary of various things that I'm covering and how it's laid out and that kind of thing. You can also get some idea of that from the table of contents that I'm going to link below. So please get hold of a copy coming March 1st. One more thing I want to say in this video is I want to give a shout out to the painter, Timothy Jones, who produced the commissioned original painting for the front cover. You can see the front cover as the thumbnail of this video, and also you can see it on my website, lydiamcgrew.com. I'm really excited about this painting. It's a beautiful painting, and it represents the evangelist. It represents the beloved disciple who was a witness at the foot of the cross, and that is what the painter Timothy Jones has titled it. He's titled it Witness. It is available to us, that image, by permission. We have the copyright for purposes of promoting the book. But Mr. Jones retains the copyright for purposes of selling prints. And I'm going to put some links below, and you can see his other art. I'm privileged to own several of his original artworks of other things. Still life. I own a still life. I bought a still life for a family member. I have, several things that are they're just beautiful. And also, if you're interested, you can even buy from him a print of Witness. Now, you'll see that it looks a little bit different than the front cover by the magic of Photoshop, but it's just a gorgeous picture, and I get nothing from that. I'm just promoting this because I think he's such an excellent artist, and I want to point this out. But he has other prints for sale as well, and other works of art for sale, and I'll provide those links below. Why am I so excited about this cover picture? Obviously it can't make the arguments of the book any different than what they are. Well, I conceived of this painting and pitched the idea to Timothy Jones for a reason, as you'll see as you look at it, because it represents that visual connection, that eyewitness connection with the crucifixion. And it shows that when we read the Gospel of John, what we're getting is the eye of the beholder.